I stand in the opulent Cartier boutique, my hands trembling as I hold the velvet box containing a $50,000 diamond necklace, and the words my wife Melissa drilled into me echo in my head. Tell them you're David Chen, returning your ex-girlfriend's jewelry because you're getting back together with your wife. The sales associate looks at me with barely concealed disgust, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the marble counter as she waits for me to speak. And I realize in this moment that my wife has turned me into the very thing I despise most: a liar, a fraud, a man without dignity. I'm here to return this jewelry, I say, my voice cracking slightly, and the woman's expression shifts from professional courtesy to something approaching contempt as I continue with the script Melissa made me rehearse a dozen times this morning. I'm David Chen, and I need to return these pieces because I'm reconciling with my wife. The sales associate's eyes narrow as she examines the jewelry, then glances at her computer screen, her fingers clicking across the keyboard with increasing urgency. Mr. Chen, she says slowly, according to our records, this jewelry was purchased by James Morrison 3 years ago. Are you saying Mr. Morrison gave you these pieces? My mouth goes dry because this wasn't part of Melissa's script, this complication she didn't prepare me for, and I feel sweat beading on my forehead as I struggle to find words that will make this nightmare end. Yes, James Morrison is my brother-in-law, and he asked me to handle the return, I stammer, hating myself for each lie that falls from my lips, each word that strips away another piece of my self-respect. The woman's expression hardens further, and she picks up her phone, her voice crisp and professional as she speaks to someone in the back office. We have a situation here that requires verification, she says, and I know with horrible certainty that my humiliation is about to become public, that this moment will be remembered and whispered about in the circles where reputation is everything. As I wait for whatever comes next, my mind races back to how I got here, to the woman who convinced me this was necessary, who told me that returning Sarah Chen's jewelry was the only way to prove my love and commitment to our marriage. Melissa's voice rings in my ears. If you really love me, James, you'll do this one small thing. It's just returning jewelry that should have been returned years ago. What's the big deal? But standing here now, watching the sales associate's face transform from professional courtesy to obvious suspicion, I understand that this isn't a small thing at all. This is the culmination of 3 years of systematic humiliation. 3 years of being molded into someone I don't recognize, someone who would stand in a luxury boutique and lie about his identity because his wife demanded it. The manager emerges from the back office, a distinguished man in his 50s who looks at me with the kind of measured assessment that comes from years of dealing with difficult customers and fraudulent returns. Sir, he says politely but firmly, we're going to need to see some identification, and we'll need to contact Mr. Morrison to verify this return. My heart pounds against my ribs as I realize that Melissa's plan is unraveling, that her carefully orchestrated scheme to humiliate not just me, but also Sarah and her family is about to explode in all our faces. The identification in my wallet says James Morrison, not David Chen. And when they call my office, when they discover that I'm the man who originally purchased this jewelry for the woman I loved before Melissa destroyed everything, the scandal will be complete. But as I reach for my wallet, my hand freezes, and something inside me rebels against this final degradation, this last step in Melissa's plan to strip away every shred of my dignity. I look at the manager, at the sales associate, at the other customers who have begun to notice the commotion, and I make a decision that surprises even me. Actually, I say, my voice growing stronger with each word, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not David Chen. I'm James Morrison, and I think I need to reconsider this return. The drive home from the jewelry store passes in a blur of rage and revelation, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles have gone white. And I can't stop thinking about the look of relief on the manager's face when I admitted my real identity, how he seemed to understand immediately that something wasn't right about the whole situation. The jewelry sits in its velvet box on the passenger seat, a $50,000 reminder of everything I've lost, everything Melissa has taken from me through 3 years of careful, calculated manipulation. I remember now how it all began, how Melissa Wong entered my life 4 years ago as my secretary at Morrison Construction. A bright, ambitious young woman from what she claimed was a modest middle-class family who impressed me with her attention to detail and her apparent dedication to helping me succeed. She was 24 then, fresh from business school, with large dark eyes that seemed to hang on my every word and a smile that made me feel like the most important person in the world. At that time, I was completely, blissfully happy with Sarah Chen, the daughter of the Chen Electronics dynasty who had been my childhood friend, my first love, my everything for as long as I could remember. Sarah and I had grown up together in the same exclusive neighborhood, our families moving in the same social circles, and everyone always said we were destined to be together. Our engagement had been announced 6 months before Melissa arrived, and our families were already planning the merger of Morrison Construction and Chen Electronics, a business alliance that would create one of the most powerful conglomerates on the West Coast. But Melissa was patient, so incredibly patient in the way she planted seeds of doubt about Sarah's motivations, about whether my fiancé truly loved me or simply saw me as a convenient path to expanding her family's empire. "I just worry about you, James," she would say during late nights at the office when we were working on important projects, her voice soft with what seemed like genuine concern. "You're such a good man, so trusting, and sometimes I wonder if people take advantage of that." She never said anything directly against Sarah, never made accusations that could be easily dismissed or defended against. Instead, she made observations that seemed innocent, but were designed to fester in my mind. "It's interesting how Sarah always seems to bring up business when you two are together," she would mention casually while organizing my calendar. "Most women in love want to talk about anything but work when they're with their fiancé." Month by month, conversation by conversation, Melissa chipped away at my confidence in Sarah's love, my trust in our relationship, my certainty about our future together. She was always there when I needed support, always ready with a sympathetic ear and advice that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. When Sarah had to cancel dinner plans because of a family emergency at Chen Electronics, Melissa would suggest that perhaps business really was Sarah's first priority. When Sarah seemed distracted during our conversations, Melissa would wonder aloud whether someone who truly loved me would be thinking about other things when we were together. The manipulation was so subtle, so expertly done, that I never realized what was happening until it was far too late. Melissa positioned herself as my protector, my advocate, the one person who truly understood my value and wanted what was best for me. She made herself indispensable at work and increasingly important in my personal life, until I found myself relying on her judgment about everything from business decisions to social commitments. The fake text messages were the final stroke of genius, the piece of evidence that sealed Sarah's fate and delivered me completely into Melissa's hands. I remember that day with perfect clarity now. Remember how Melissa came into my office with tears in her eyes, carrying printed screenshots of what appeared to be conversations between Sarah and her best friend Emma discussing their relationship. "I'm so sorry you have to see this," Melissa had said, her voice breaking with what seemed like genuine anguish. "I was using your laptop to prepare the quarterly reports, and these messages popped up in your email. Sarah must have forwarded them by mistake. Or maybe—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to voice the horrible possibility that Sarah had sent them deliberately, as some kind of cruel joke. The messages were devastating. Conversations where Sarah discussed her relationship with me in purely mercenary terms, talking about securing the Morrison fortune and how easy it was to manipulate me into thinking she loved me. "James is so naive," one message read. "He actually believes I'm with him for love. The merger is going to make my family so much money, and all I have to do is keep pretending to be the perfect fiancé until the wedding." I should have questioned the messages, should have demanded to see the originals, or asked Sarah directly about their authenticity. But Melissa had done her work too well, had spent months preparing me to believe exactly this kind of betrayal, and my heart was already broken before my mind could engage. The messages confirmed every doubt she had so carefully planted, validated every fear she had helped nurture about Sarah's true feelings. The confrontation with Sarah was brutal and one-sided, me accusing her of using me while she stared at me in shock and confusion, trying to defend herself against charges that made no sense to her. "James, what are you talking about?" she kept saying, tears streaming down her face as I showed her the printed messages. "I never wrote these. I never said any of these things. Why would you believe I could be so cruel?" But I was beyond reason by then, too hurt and angry to listen to her denials, too convinced of her guilt to consider that I might be wrong. I called off our engagement that very day, told her I never wanted to see her again, and watched the woman I had loved since childhood walk out of my life forever, her shoulders shaking with sobs that I told myself were probably fake, probably just another manipulation now that her scheme had been exposed. Melissa was there to comfort me, of course, holding me while I grieved the loss of what I thought had been a false love, telling me how sorry she was that I had to go through such betrayal, how proud she was of my strength in confronting the truth. "You deserve so much better," she whispered. And I believed her because I needed to believe someone, needed to feel that at least one person in my life was genuine and caring. Our relationship developed quickly after that, my emotional dependence on her growing stronger with each passing day as she helped me navigate the aftermath of my broken engagement. She was always there with exactly the right words, the perfect amount of support, the ideal balance of sympathy and encouragement. When I proposed to her 6 months later, it felt like the natural progression of a relationship built on trust and mutual understanding, the foundation of a partnership with someone who had proven her loyalty during my darkest hour. I should have realized that her comfort was too perfect, her support too calculated, her availability too convenient. I should have questioned how quickly she was ready to transition from secretary to girlfriend to fiancé, how seamlessly she stepped into Sarah's place in my life and my family's expectations. But I was too broken, too grateful for her presence to examine her motivations too closely. The wedding was small and private, nothing like the grand celebration Sarah and I had planned, and I told myself that intimate was better, that keeping things simple was a sign of maturity and genuine love rather than expediency. Melissa became Mrs. Morrison with minimal fanfare, and she quickly established herself as an essential part of my personal and professional life, someone whose judgment I trusted implicitly and whose opinions carried enormous weight in my decision-making. Looking back now, I can see how she systematically isolated me from my family and friends, how she created conflicts and misunderstandings that drove wedges between me and the people who might have questioned her influence. My parents began to seem controlling and interfering when Melissa pointed out how they favored my younger brother David. My best friend Marcus became someone who was probably jealous of my success when Melissa suggested that his warnings about her were motivated by his own romantic disappointment. But the jewelry return was different, was a level of humiliation that finally broke through the fog of manipulation and made me see clearly what my life had become. Standing in that Cartier boutique, being forced to lie about my identity, to pretend to be someone else in order to return gifts I had given to the woman I truly loved, that was the moment I finally understood that Melissa hadn't rescued me from Sarah's deception. She had orchestrated the deception herself, and I had been her willing accomplice in my own destruction. As I pull into the driveway of the house Melissa insisted we buy, the house that's in her name because she convinced me it was better for tax purposes, I make a decision that would have been impossible just hours ago. I'm going to confront her about the forged signature I saw on that receipt, about the fake text messages that destroyed my relationship with Sarah, about every lie and manipulation that brought me to this moment of absolute humiliation. It's time to find out who my wife really is and what she really wants from me. The house is silent when I enter, my footsteps echoing on the marble floors that Melissa chose because she said they made the space feel more elegant, more worthy of the Morrison name. I find her in the study that used to be my sanctuary, sitting behind the desk that was my father's and his father's before him, her fingers flying across the keyboard of her laptop with the focused intensity that I once admired, but now recognize as something far more sinister. "How did it go?" she asks without looking up, her voice bright with anticipation that makes my stomach turn. "Did they give you any trouble about the return?" I set the jewelry box on the desk with enough force to make her look up, and for just a moment I see something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation, before her expression settles back into the concerned, supportive mask she's worn for 3 years. "I didn't return it," I say simply, watching her carefully for her reaction. "What do you mean you didn't return it?" The brightness in her voice takes on a sharp edge, and she closes her laptop with a snap that sounds unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "James, we discussed this. Returning that jewelry is important for our marriage, for moving forward from your past." "I saw the receipt," I continue, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I saw David Chen's signature on the original purchase documentation. But it wasn't David's handwriting, Melissa. It was yours." The silence that follows is deafening, stretching between us like a chasm that reveals the true distance that has always existed in our marriage. Melissa's face goes through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, defiance, before settling into something I've never seen before: cold, calculating honesty. "So, what if it was?" she says finally, her voice completely different now, stripped of the warmth and concern that I realize was always an act. "So what if I've been planning this for longer than you know? You were never going to see the truth on your own, James. You were too weak, too naive, too willing to believe in fairy tale love stories that don't exist in the real world." The admission hits me like a physical blow, not because I didn't suspect, but because hearing it confirmed destroys the last vestiges of the illusion I've been living in. "The text messages," I say, and it's not a question because I already know the answer. "Obviously fake," she confirms with a laugh that sounds like breaking glass. "Sarah Chen never wrote those messages, never said those things about you, but you believed them so easily, were so ready to think the worst of someone who actually loved you, that it was almost too simple." I sink into the chair across from the desk, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight as the full scope of her deception becomes clear. "Why?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want to hear the answer. "Because you had everything," she says, standing up and walking around the desk to face me directly, her movement predatory and confident in a way that makes my skin crawl. "You had a family business worth hundreds of millions, a trust fund that would keep you comfortable for life, social connections that could open any door, and a beautiful, intelligent fiancé from an equally wealthy family. You had everything handed to you, and you were too stupid to appreciate it or protect it." She begins to pace the room, her energy building as she talks, and I realize this is probably the first time she's been able to speak honestly about her motivations. The first time she's been able to reveal the person she's kept hidden beneath years of careful performance. I grew up with nothing, she continues, her voice gaining intensity. My father was a gambling addict who lost our house when I was 12. My mother cleaned offices at night and took in sewing during the day just to keep food on the table. I wore second-hand clothes to school and pretended I wasn't hungry when other kids talked about their family vacations and weekend trips to the country club. I want to feel sympathy for her difficult childhood, but the coldness in her voice, the way she talks about her suffering as justification for destroying others, makes it impossible. This isn't someone sharing painful memories. This is someone explaining why she believes she deserves everything she's taken. So when I got the job as your secretary, she says, stopping directly in front of me, I saw an opportunity that most people never get. A chance to take everything that people like you think you deserve just because of who your parents are. You were so easy to manipulate, so desperate to believe that someone could love you for yourself rather than your money, that it was almost disappointing how quickly you fell for everything. And Sarah? I ask, though I'm afraid to hear how deep this conspiracy goes. Sarah Chen was the only real obstacle, Melissa admits, with something that might be respect in her voice. She actually did love you, which made her dangerous. She was smart enough to see through me eventually, wealthy enough that she couldn't be bought, and connected enough that she could have exposed everything. Getting rid of her was absolutely necessary. The casual way she talks about destroying Sarah's happiness, about breaking up a relationship based on genuine love and trust, makes me understand that I'm not dealing with someone who made a series of bad choices. I'm dealing with someone who is fundamentally different from me, someone whose moral compass points in directions I can't even comprehend. But it wasn't just about getting rid of Sarah, she continues, and now she's smiling, an expression that transforms her face into something almost unrecognizable. It was about proving that I could take everything from people like you and make you grateful for the privilege of being destroyed. You didn't just lose Sarah. You helped me destroy her. You didn't just give me access to your money. You married me and put my name on everything willingly. I think about the house that's in her name, the joint bank accounts she convinced me to establish. The power of attorney documents she said were just routine paperwork for married couples. Every signature I gave her, every piece of trust I offered, has been a weapon she's used against me. The jewelry return was supposed to be the final humiliation, she explains, her voice taking on the tone of someone describing a particularly clever chess move. Not just for you, but for Sarah and her family. Having you pretend to be David Chen, returning jewelry that represented your relationship with their daughter. It would have been such a public scandal, such a perfect way to destroy both families' reputations while making you complicit in your own degradation. I realize now that every humiliating task she's given me over the past 3 years, making me cancel plans with my family, forcing me to apologize to her friends for imagined slights, insisting I needed her permission for business decisions, has been building to this moment. She's been systematically breaking down my sense of self, my confidence, my connection to everything I valued, until I became someone who would stand in a jewelry store and lie about his identity because his wife demanded it. There's more, isn't there? I ask, because the scope of her planning, the depth of her deception, suggests something larger than just a gold-digging scheme. Oh, James, she says, her smile growing wider. You have no idea how much more there is. Do you think I've been working alone all this time? Do you think someone like me could have pulled this off without help from people who understand how business really works? The name comes to me before she says it, a connection my subconscious has been trying to make for months. Jonathan Hayes. Very good, she says, clapping her hands together like she's congratulating a particularly slow student. Jonathan has been so patient, waiting for the right moment to acquire Morrison Construction at a fraction of its real value. Having an inside source of information, someone with access to your accounts and your business plans, has been invaluable in setting up the perfect hostile takeover. Jonathan Hayes, my biggest business rival, the man who's been trying to destroy my family's company for years through legitimate competition, and who apparently decided that corruption and conspiracy were more efficient methods. The pieces fall into place with horrible clarity. The insider information that's been leaking to competitors, the mysteriously timed business decisions that have put Morrison Construction at a disadvantage, the financial irregularities that I attributed to market fluctuations, but now understand were deliberate sabotage. You've been feeding him information for 3 years, I say, and it's not a question. Among other services, she confirms with a smile that makes my skin crawl. Jonathan is a very appreciative partner in business and other matters. The implication hits me like a sledgehammer, and I understand that my humiliation is even more complete than I realized. Not only has my wife been systematically destroying my life and stealing my assets, she's been having an affair with my business rival while doing it, probably laughing about my naivety with the man who's been planning to destroy everything my family built. When I confront Melissa about the forged signature, I realize I said out loud, she doesn't even bother denying it. Why should I? She asks, her voice completely cold now. What are you going to do about it, James? Who are you going to tell? Your family thinks you've been making terrible business decisions for years. Your friends think you've become controlling and paranoid since our marriage. Even if you could prove that I've been manipulating you, do you think anyone would believe that strong, successful James Morrison was so completely fooled by his secretary? She's right, and we both know it. The isolation she's created, the reputation she's built for me as someone who's become unstable and difficult since Sarah left, means that any accusations I make will sound like the desperate claims of someone trying to avoid responsibility for his own failures. Besides, she continues, moving back to the desk and opening her laptop again, it's far too late to change anything now. The bankruptcy papers will be filed next week. The house will be sold to pay debts that you will be personally responsible for. And I'll disappear with enough money to start over somewhere new, with someone who appreciates my talents more than you ever did. I sit in that chair, looking at this woman who has systematically destroyed everything I valued, everything I loved, everyone I cared about. And I realize that she's not just evil. She's thorough. She's planned for every contingency, anticipated every possible resistance, built a web of deception and financial manipulation so complete that even discovering the truth doesn't give me any way to fight back. The man I've become, this hollow shell who just tried to humiliate himself in a jewelry store because his wife demanded it, isn't strong enough to challenge her. The man I was before I met her, the man who loved Sarah Chen and believed in truth and loyalty and family honor, is gone, destroyed as completely as if he had died. And maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. I stand up slowly, my decision crystallizing with each breath, each heartbeat, each moment of clarity about what my life has become. You're right, I tell her, watching surprise flicker across her face at my calm acceptance. There's nothing I can do to stop you. You've won completely. I walk toward the door, turning back only once to look at her sitting behind my father's desk, probably already planning how to spend the money she's stolen, how to celebrate the destruction of everything my family built. Enjoy your victory, Melissa. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. The drive through the rain is almost peaceful, my mind finally quiet after years of constant doubt and self-recrimination. I push the speedometer higher than I should, taking corners faster than is safe, not caring about the consequences because consequences require a future, and I can't imagine any future worth living. The truck comes out of nowhere, or maybe I drive into its path deliberately, in the moment of impact. I'm not sure which. But as the world explodes around me in a symphony of breaking glass and twisting metal, my last conscious thought is crystal clear. If I could do it all over again, I would choose differently. I would trust my instincts, protect my family, and never let anyone make me into someone I'm not. Then everything goes black, and James Morrison dies in the wreckage of his car and his life. And then I opened my eyes. I'm sitting in my office at Morrison Construction, the morning sun streaming through the windows that face downtown Seattle. And my secretary is standing in front of my desk with a concerned expression on her face. But this isn't just any secretary. This is Melissa Wong, exactly as she looked 3.5 years ago, wearing the navy blue dress she wore the day she showed me those fake text messages, carrying the same manila folder that contained the lies that destroyed my relationship with Sarah. The recognition hits me like an electric shock. Every detail of this moment burned into my memory from a different lifetime. I know that in this folder are printed screenshots of text messages that Sarah Chen never sent. Conversations that Melissa fabricated to convince me that the woman I loved was using me for my family's money. I know that if I let this conversation proceed the way it did before, if I look at those fake messages and believe them, I will lose everything that matters to me and spend 3 years as a puppet in my own life. But this time I see through every lie, every calculated tear, every perfectly timed pause. "Mr. Morrison," Melissa begins, her voice soft with what I now recognize as completely artificial concern. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but something has come to my attention that I think you need to see. It's about Miss Chen, and I'm afraid it's rather disturbing." I lean back in my chair and study her face. This woman who destroyed everything I held dear, who turned me into someone I despised, who made me complicit in my own humiliation. She's standing there with the same folder, wearing the same concerned expression, speaking the same lines she used to destroy my life. But this time I see the calculation behind every gesture, the predatory patience behind every sympathetic word. "Melissa," I say slowly, watching her carefully for her reaction. "I think it's time you transferred to a different department. I've decided I no longer need a personal secretary." The shock in her eyes is immediate and complete, a crack in her perfectly maintained facade that tells me everything. She wasn't expecting this. Her timeline is disrupted. Her carefully laid plans are suddenly in jeopardy. And for the first time in either of my lives, I hold the power in our relationship. What?" she stammers, the folder in her hands suddenly seeming heavy and uncertain. "Mr. Morrison, I don't understand. Have I done something wrong? Is this about the quarterly reports, because I can fix any errors?" "No errors," I interrupt, standing up and walking around my desk to face her directly. "Your work has been exactly what I expected, but I've realized that I prefer to handle my own schedule, my own correspondence, my own decision-making. I'm sure Mr. Patterson in accounting could use someone with your particular skills." She's struggling to process this development, to figure out how to salvage a situation she never imagined could go wrong. I can see her mind racing, trying to find the right combination of words that will restore her position, that will get her back on track to destroy my life. "James," she says, dropping the formal address and letting her voice take on a more intimate tone. "Whatever's bothering you, we can work through it together. I care about you, about your success, about your happiness. If something's wrong, let me help you fix it." The manipulation is so obvious now, so clearly calculated to make me feel like she's the only person who truly understands me, who truly wants what's best for me. But I've seen where this road leads, seen what happens when I trust her concern, when I let her help me fix problems that she created in the first place. "Actually," I say, taking the folder from her hands before she can react, "I think I'll take a look at whatever this is on my own. Professional curiosity." I open the folder and examine the printed screenshots of the fake text messages, seeing them now with the clarity that comes from knowing the truth. The formatting is slightly off, the timestamp spacing inconsistent, the language just a little too perfect in its cruelty. These aren't authentic text messages. They're forgeries created by someone who understands technology well enough to fake screenshots, but not well enough to make them perfect. Interesting, I say, closing the folder and setting it on my desk. These appear to be fabricated. The metadata is all wrong, and the formatting doesn't match standard messaging applications. Someone went to a lot of trouble to create fake evidence of conversations that never happened. Melissa's face goes pale, and I see her hands trembling slightly as she realizes that her master stroke, her perfect manipulation, has been exposed before it could even be deployed. I don't know what you mean, she says, but her voice lacks conviction, lacks the certainty that made her previous lies so believable. I think you know exactly what I mean, I reply, my voice calm and controlled in a way that I could never manage in my previous life. And I think we both know that this conversation is over. HR will have your transfer paperwork ready by the end of the day. After she leaves, her departure hurried and confused, I sit back down at my desk and feel something I haven't experienced in years. Complete clarity about who I am and what I want. The fog of manipulation that clouded my judgment for 3 years has been lifted, and I can see my life, my relationships, my future with perfect focus. The first thing I need to do is call Sarah. My hands are steady as I dial Sarah's number, steadier than they've been in years, and when she answers on the second ring, her voice cautious but warm, I feel something inside me settle back into place. Sarah, I say, and even speaking her name feels like coming home after a long exile. I need to tell you something important. Someone has been planning to hurt both our families, and I think we should meet. James? There's surprise in her voice, confusion but not anger, and I realize that in this timeline I haven't yet destroyed our relationship with false accusations and manufactured betrayals. What do you mean someone's planning to hurt our families? Is this about the Morrison-Chen merger discussions? It's related, but it's much more personal than business, I tell her, choosing my words carefully, because I need her to take this seriously without thinking I've lost my mind. I've discovered that my secretary has been fabricating evidence to damage our relationship, and I believe she's working with people who want to sabotage both our companies. Can you meet me for lunch? Somewhere private where we can talk freely? The pause that follows stretches just long enough for me to worry that she might refuse, that even without Melissa's manipulation, the trust between us might be too fragile to survive this kind of revelation. But when she speaks again, her voice carries the fierce intelligence and unwavering loyalty that made me fall in love with her in the first place. The private dining room at the Harbor Club, she says without hesitation. 1 o'clock. And James, be careful until we meet. If someone's really planning something against our families, you might be in more danger than you realize. After hanging up, I call my private investigator, a man my father has used for years to conduct background checks on potential business partners and acquisitions. Marcus Chen, no relation to Sarah's family despite the shared surname, is discreet, thorough, and expensive, exactly the kind of professional I need for what I'm planning. Marcus, I say when he answers, I need a complete background investigation on someone, and I need it done quietly and quickly. My secretary, Melissa Wong. I want to know everything. Her real family background, her education credentials, her previous employment, her financial situation, and especially any connections she might have to my business competitors. How complete do you want this investigation? Marcus asks, his voice professional and uncurious about my motivations. Financial records, personal relationships, criminal background, employment verification? Everything, I confirm. And Marcus? I have reason to believe she may be involved in corporate espionage, so please be extremely careful about operational security. Don't let anyone know you're conducting this investigation, and report only to me. The rest of the morning passes in a blur of business calls and meetings, but my mind is constantly working on the larger puzzle of Melissa's conspiracy. If she's been planning this manipulation for as long as I suspect, if she really has been working with Jonathan Hayes to destroy Morrison Construction, then there must be evidence of their collaboration, financial trails that connect them, communications that reveal their plans. I access the company's security footage from my desktop computer, something I rarely did in my previous life, but now seems absolutely essential. Hours of recorded surveillance from the office building, the parking garage, the elevator banks that serve Morrison Construction's floors. If Melissa has been meeting with Jonathan Hayes or his representatives, if she's been passing documents or information, there might be visual proof. What I find in the footage from 6 months ago makes my blood run cold. Melissa entering the building after hours, using her security keycard to access my office, photographing documents from my desk and filing cabinets with a small digital camera. She's methodical, professional, clearly experienced in this kind of corporate espionage. This isn't the desperate scheme of an opportunistic secretary. This is the work of someone with training, someone with a plan, someone who has done this before. But more damning than the theft of documents is what I see in the parking garage footage from the same night. Melissa meeting with a man I recognize immediately, Jonathan Hayes, my biggest business rival. The man who has been trying to acquire Morrison Construction for years through increasingly aggressive tactics. They embrace like lovers, not conspirators, and the intimacy of their body language makes it clear that their relationship is both professional and deeply personal. I realize now that every business setback Morrison Construction has suffered over the past 2 years, every contract we've lost to Hayes Industries, every strategic advantage our competitors have gained has been the result of information Melissa provided to her real partner. She hasn't just been manipulating me personally, she's been systematically sabotaging my family's company, feeding inside information to our biggest enemy, while playing the role of loyal secretary. The lunch meeting with Sarah takes place in the private dining room of the Harbor Club, an exclusive restaurant where business leaders and old Seattle families conduct their most sensitive conversations. Sarah arrives exactly on time, wearing an emerald green dress that brings out the color of her eyes. And when she embraces me in greeting, I feel the warmth and genuine affection that I threw away in my previous life. "You look different," she says as we sit down, studying my face with the careful attention that always made me feel like she could see straight through to my soul. More focused, somehow. More like yourself than you've seemed in months. I realize that she's right, that the cloud of confusion and self-doubt that Melissa created has lifted, leaving me feeling more clear-headed and confident than I have in years. "I've had some revelations about people I trusted," I tell her carefully. "People who haven't had my best interests at heart." Over lunch, I explain everything I've discovered about Melissa's deception. The fake text messages she was planning to show me, the corporate espionage I caught on security footage, her relationship with Jonathan Hayes. I watch Sarah's expression change from surprise to anger to something approaching admiration as she processes the scope and sophistication of the conspiracy against our families. "She's not just a gold digger," Sarah says when I finish, her voice thoughtful and analytical. "This is a professional operation. Someone with real skills in manipulation and corporate espionage. The question is whether she's freelance or part of a larger organization." "What do you mean?" I ask, though I suspect I know where her thinking is leading. "James, if someone can plan and execute this kind of long-term manipulation, If they can maintain false identities and forged documents for years, they've probably done this before. Your secretary might be part of a group that specializes in infiltrating wealthy families and businesses, extracting valuable information and assets through psychological manipulation and relationship sabotage. The possibility had occurred to me, but hearing Sarah articulate it makes the threat seem even more serious. If Melissa is part of a professional conspiracy, if she has training and support from other criminals, then stopping her will require more than just exposing her lies. It will require dismantling an entire operation. I want to help, Sarah continues, reaching across the table to take my hand. Our families have been friends for generations, and if someone is targeting both our companies, we need to work together to protect ourselves and everyone we care about. Looking at her across the table, seeing the determination in her eyes, and feeling the strength of her support, I understand that this is my chance to undo the greatest mistake of my previous life. Not just to avoid being manipulated by Melissa, but to build the kind of partnership with Sarah that could have been the foundation of an extraordinary life together. There's something else, I tell her, my voice serious. I think we should accelerate our engagement announcement. If Melissa and Hayes are planning something that depends on destroying our relationship, we need to make it clear that their window of opportunity is closing. Sarah smiles. The first genuinely happy expression I've seen from her in months. Are you proposing to me, James Morrison? I'm proposing that we stop letting other people dictate the timing of our lives, I reply. I'm proposing that we take control of our future before someone else tries to destroy it. When she says yes, her voice clear and certain, I feel like I'm finally living in my real life instead of some twisted, alternate version created by my enemies. The next 2 weeks pass in a carefully orchestrated performance designed to give Melissa exactly what she thinks she wants, while building an unassailable case against her and Jonathan Hayes. On the surface, I appear to be the same naive, easily manipulated man she's been controlling for months. But every conversation, every document, every seemingly innocent interaction is being recorded and monitored by the security team Sarah's family provided. I start by calling Melissa back to my office, apologizing for my overreaction to her transfer and asking her to resume her position as my personal secretary. The relief and calculation in her eyes when I explained that I've been under stress about business pressures and took my anxiety out on her, unfairly tells me everything I need to know about her true motivations. I'm just glad you're feeling better, she says, settling back into the chair across from my desk like she's reclaiming conquered territory. I was so worried that something serious was bothering you, something that might affect your judgment about important decisions. Actually, I tell her, opening the manila folder containing the fake text messages she tried to show me 2 weeks ago. I think you were right to be concerned about Sarah. I've been doing some thinking about our relationship, about whether it's really based on love or just convenience and family expectations. The spark of interest in her eyes is immediate and predatory, and I can see her mentally adjusting her timeline, calculating how quickly she can push me toward the breakdown she's been orchestrating. What kind of thinking? She asks, her voice carefully neutral but hungry underneath. I've been wondering if Sarah really loves me or if she's just going through the motions because our families expect us to marry. I continue, hating every word but knowing that this performance is necessary to expose the full scope of her plans. Sometimes when we're together, she seems distracted, like she's thinking about business instead of our relationship. Melissa leans forward, sensing opportunity like a predator scenting wounded prey. I've noticed that too, she says with fake reluctance, as if admitting this observation causes her pain. Sometimes when she calls the office, she asks about company business before she asks about you. It makes me wonder if the merger is more important to her than the marriage. Over the following days, I feed her carefully crafted doubts and insecurities, giving her openings to plant the seeds of suspicion she's been cultivating for months. I complain about Sarah's busy schedule, wonder aloud about her motivations, express frustration about feeling like I'm competing with Chen Electronics for her attention. Each conversation is recorded by devices the security team planted throughout my office, building a comprehensive record of Melissa's psychological manipulation techniques. But the real breakthrough comes when I tell her I'm planning to propose to Sarah again, with a more elaborate ring and a more public ceremony. I want to do something spectacular, I tell her, watching her face carefully for her reaction. Something that will prove to everyone how much I love her and how committed I am to our future together. That's wonderful, Melissa says, but I can see the panic behind her eyes, the desperate calculation as she realizes that my marriage to Sarah will complete the merger she and Hayes have been trying to prevent. But are you sure you want to make such a public commitment? What if she says no? What if she's not as ready for marriage as you think she is? She won't say no, I reply with confidence that's only partially fake. But I want to choose the perfect ring, something that shows I understand her taste and her value. I was thinking about that emerald set at Cartier, the one that costs about $200,000. Could you help me arrange a private viewing? The greed in her eyes when she hears the dollar amount is unmistakable, and I know that she's already planning how to turn this purchase into another weapon against me. Of course, she says quickly. I'll call them today and set up an appointment. You're such a generous man, James. Sarah is lucky to have someone who values her so highly. But generosity isn't what Melissa sees when she looks at that jewelry. She sees opportunity, another chance to humiliate me, another tool she can use to destroy my relationship and my reputation. I know because I've seen this pattern before, lived through this manipulation in my previous life. That evening, I meet with Marcus Chen to review the background investigation he's conducted on Melissa. The results are even more disturbing than I expected, revealing a pattern of infiltration and manipulation that stretches back years. Her real name is Melissa Park, Marcus reports, spreading documents across the conference table in his office. She's originally from Vancouver, not Seattle, and her family background is completely fabricated. Her parents aren't middle-class immigrants. Her father is a convicted con artist who specialized in financial fraud, and her mother died when she was 16. The documentation he's assembled paints a picture of someone who has been constructing false identities and manipulating wealthy marks since she was in college. Previous victims include the son of a real estate developer in Portland, a tech entrepreneur in San Francisco, and the heir to a restaurant chain in Vancouver. In each case, she gained access through employment, built romantic relationships with her targets, and disappeared with significant amounts of money and proprietary business information. But this operation is different, Marcus continues, showing me surveillance photos of Melissa meeting with Jonathan Hayes at various locations around the city. Previous jobs were quick extractions, 6 months to 2 years maximum. She's been working on you for over 3 years, which suggests this isn't just about immediate financial gain. This is about something bigger. The photographs tell the story of a sophisticated conspiracy that goes far beyond simple theft or fraud. Melissa and Hayes meeting in hotel rooms, exchanging documents in parking garages, embracing with the intimacy of long-term lovers and partners. But more concerning are the other people in some of the photographs. Men and women I don't recognize who appear to be part of a larger criminal organization. We think she's part of a group that specializes in corporate espionage and hostile takeovers, Marcus explains. They identify successful family businesses, infiltrate them through personal relationships, extract proprietary information, and then facilitate acquisitions by partner companies at below-market prices. Morrison Construction isn't just a target for theft, it's a target for complete acquisition. I study the financial records Marcus has compiled, showing the flow of money between shell companies connected to Hayes Industries and accounts linked to Melissa's various false identities. The numbers reveal a conspiracy that's been in motion for years, funded by previous successful operations and aimed at acquiring Morrison Construction as their biggest prize yet. "There's something else," Marcus says, his voice grim. "We've identified at least 3 other family businesses in the Pacific Northwest that have been targeted by this group over the past 5 years. 2 of them were successfully acquired by Hayes Industries after the founding families suffered personal scandals and financial difficulties remarkably similar to what's been happening to you." The scope of the conspiracy is staggering, a systematic campaign to destroy and acquire successful family businesses through psychological manipulation and corporate espionage. Morrison Construction isn't just facing theft or fraud. We're facing a criminal organization with years of experience and multiple successful operations. But now that I know the truth, now that I understand the full scope of their plans, I can fight back with advantages they don't know I possess. I have knowledge of their methods, evidence of their previous crimes, and most importantly, I have allies who understand the stakes and are willing to help me protect everything my family has built. The trap is set, the evidence is being gathered, and soon Melissa and Hayes will discover that the naive, easily manipulated James Morrison they've been targeting is gone forever. The Morrison Family Charity Gala is held every year in the ballroom of the Four Seasons Olympic Hotel, an elegant affair that brings together Seattle's business elite, political leaders, and philanthropic organizations for an evening of networking and fundraising. This year's gala is particularly well attended, with over 300 guests, including representatives from every major company in the Pacific Northwest, making it the perfect venue for what I have planned. Melissa arrives wearing the designer gown she insisted on buying for the occasion, a black silk creation that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and which she charged to one of my credit cards without asking permission. She moves through the crowd with confidence and grace, playing the role of the supportive wife to perfection, accepting compliments on her appearance and expressing gratitude for the charitable work Morrison Construction supports. Sarah is also here tonight, having accepted my invitation to attend as my guest, and hopefully, by the end of the evening, as my publicly announced fiancée. She looks stunning in emerald green, the color that's always brought out the warmth in her eyes, and watching her interact with my family and friends reminds me of everything I threw away in my previous life. But tonight isn't about romance or celebration. Tonight is about justice. Jonathan Hayes arrives fashionably late, as is his custom, making an entrance that draws attention and establishes his importance to everyone in the room. He's accompanied by his usual entourage of business associates and social climbers, people who attach themselves to power and wealth without much concern for how that power was acquired or maintained. I watch from across the ballroom as Melissa and Hayes carefully avoid appearing to know each other too well, limiting their interaction to polite greetings and brief conversations that could easily be mistaken for casual social networking. But I can see the tension between them, the way their eyes find each other across the room, the careful choreography of 2 people trying to maintain a public facade while managing a private conspiracy. When it comes time for the traditional annual speech, I take the microphone at the front of the ballroom, looking out at the assembled crowd of Seattle's most influential citizens. Normally, this speech focuses on Morrison Construction's charitable giving, our community partnerships, and our gratitude to the organizations we support. But tonight, I have a different message to deliver. Good evening, everyone, I begin, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's excellent acoustics. Thank you for joining us for this year's Morrison Construction Charity Gala. Before we continue with the evening's festivities, I have some important announcements to make. I can see Melissa near the front of the crowd, her face expectant and pleased, probably thinking this is the moment I'll announce some new business venture or charitable initiative that will enhance her social standing. Sarah stands beside my parents, her expression curious but supportive, trusting me even though she doesn't know exactly what I have planned. First, I continue, I want to announce my engagement to Sarah Chen, the woman I've loved since childhood and who will soon become my wife and partner in life and business. The applause that follows is genuine and enthusiastic, and I can see Sarah's face light up with surprise and joy as she realizes this is my public declaration of our commitment. But I also notice Melissa's expression change, a flicker of something between panic and calculation crossing her features as she realizes her timeline is collapsing. But more importantly, I say, waiting for the applause to die down, I want to share some information that affects everyone in this room. Information about a criminal conspiracy that has been targeting Seattle's business community for years. The change in atmosphere is immediate and electric. Conversations stopping mid-sentence as 300 of the city's most powerful people focus their complete attention on what I am about to reveal. This is no longer a charity gala. This has become something far more serious. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my personal secretary has been involved in systematic corporate espionage, stealing proprietary information from Morrison Construction and providing it to our competitors. But this isn't just a case of simple theft. This is part of a larger conspiracy involving multiple criminal associates who specialize in infiltrating successful family businesses through personal relationships. I can see Melissa pushing through the crowd, trying to reach the exit, but the security team Sarah's family provided is already moving to block her path. Hayes is also moving, his face pale with what I hope is the beginning of real fear. The evidence we've compiled over the past 3 weeks includes surveillance footage of document theft, financial records showing payment for stolen information, and recordings of conversations detailing plans to manipulate and destroy business relationships for financial gain. I gesture to the large screens that have been set up around the ballroom, and the security team begins displaying the evidence Marcus Chen compiled. Photographs of Melissa and Hayes meeting in secret, financial transactions between their various shell companies, surveillance footage of Melissa stealing documents from my office after hours. Melissa Park, I continue, using her real name and watching her face transform from panic to something approaching desperate fury, has been operating under false identity for years, targeting successful businessmen and their families as part of a criminal organization that specializes in corporate espionage and hostile takeovers. The crowd's reaction is a mixture of shock, anger, and fascination as they recognize the implications of what I'm revealing. These aren't just crimes against Morrison Construction. They're attacks on the entire business community, threats to every family-owned company in the region. Jonathan Hayes has been the primary beneficiary of this stolen information, I continue, watching as Hayes tries unsuccessfully to leave the ballroom. Over the past 5 years, Hayes Industries has acquired 3 family businesses after their owners suffered mysterious personal scandals and financial difficulties remarkably similar to what my family has experienced. The screens now display financial records showing the connection between Hayes Industries and the criminal organization, the flow of money that funded years of manipulation and theft. The evidence is comprehensive, damning, and impossible to deny. But tonight, I say, my voice growing stronger with each word, this conspiracy ends. Federal investigators are currently executing search warrants on Hayes Industries and several associated businesses. Criminal charges will be filed tomorrow morning, and Morrison Construction will continue to thrive as an independent, family-owned business committed to integrity and community partnership. The applause that follows is different from before. This isn't polite social appreciation. This is the sound of a community rallying around one of its own, recognizing a threat to their shared values and expressing support for justice. As security escorts Melissa and Hayes from the ballroom, I feel a weight lifting from my shoulders that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. The man who was manipulated, controlled, and broken is gone. In his place stands someone stronger, someone who learned from his mistakes, someone who chose truth over comfortable lies. Later that evening, after the investigators have finished taking statements and the last guests have departed, I find myself alone with Sarah on the hotel's terrace, looking out over Elliott Bay and the city lights that represent everything we're fighting to protect. "I'm proud of you," she says simply, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "That took tremendous courage, exposing yourself like that, admitting you were deceived. A lot of people would have tried to handle it privately, tried to save face. I learned that saving face isn't worth anything if you lose your soul in the process," I reply, thinking about the man I became in my previous life, the hollow shell who would have done anything to avoid public embarrassment. Some things are more important than pride. When she kisses me, it feels like coming home after a long exile, like finding my way back to the life I was always meant to live. But more than romance, more than personal happiness, I feel the satisfaction of knowing that we've protected not just our own families, but everyone else who might have been targeted by this criminal conspiracy. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure that manipulators face consequences for their actions and that their victims can rebuild their lives with dignity and hope. 6 months later, I wake up in the bedroom of the house Sarah and I bought together in Madison Park, the morning sun streaming through windows that face Mount Rainier, and I feel something I haven't experienced in years. Complete peace with who I am and the choices I've made. Morrison Construction has expanded into 3 new markets. Our employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and I wake up every morning excited about the work ahead. But more than professional success, I've reclaimed something more valuable: my sense of self. The criminal trial of Melissa Park and Jonathan Hayes concluded last month with guilty verdicts on all charges: conspiracy, corporate espionage, mail fraud, wire fraud, and criminal impersonation. Melissa received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, while Hayes got 15 years plus forfeiture of assets acquired through illegal means. The judge specifically noted the sophisticated nature of their conspiracy and the harm they caused to multiple victims over several years. But perhaps more satisfying than their imprisonment is what we discovered during the investigation that followed their arrest. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit identified 7 other victims of their organization across the western United States. Business owners who had suffered mysterious personal scandals and financial difficulties before losing their companies to hostile takeovers. With the evidence we provided, federal prosecutors were able to build cases that resulted in asset forfeiture and compensation for the victims' families. The ripple effects of that night at the charity gala continue to spread through Seattle's business community. 3 major companies have implemented new security protocols to protect against corporate espionage. The Better Business Bureau has created new verification procedures for background checks on key employees. And the Seattle Police Department has established a specialized unit to investigate financial crimes targeting family businesses. Sarah and I don't rush back into our previous relationship dynamics. Instead, we build something new, something stronger, based on the people we've become rather than who we were 5 years ago. Our engagement party 3 months ago was a small, intimate gathering of family and close friends focused on celebrating our future rather than impressing society. When she tells me she's proud of how I handled the situation with Melissa and Hayes, I realize that's worth more than any business deal or family approval. "You're different than you were before," she said to me just last week as we walked through Pike Place Market, something we've started doing every Saturday morning as a way to stay connected to the city and each other. More grounded, somehow. More confident in your own judgment. She's right. The experience of being completely deceived, of losing myself so completely that I became someone I didn't recognize, has given me a clarity about my values and priorities that I never had before. I trust my instincts now in a way I never did when I was younger, when I was more concerned with being liked than with being authentic. The wedding planning has been a joy rather than a stress, partly because we've learned to communicate openly about everything: our fears, our hopes, our expectations for marriage and family life. We've decided to have the ceremony at the Harbor Club, where we had our crucial lunch meeting 6 months ago, a private celebration with immediate family and the friends who supported us through everything. Morrison Construction's integration with Chen Electronics is proceeding as a true partnership rather than a traditional merger, with both families maintaining ownership and control of their respective operations while collaborating on projects that benefit from our combined expertise. My father and Sarah's father have developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than just business convenience, and our mothers are already planning how to spoil the grandchildren they're expecting us to provide. But the most significant change is in my relationship with my own family. The isolation that Melissa created, the resentment and misunderstanding she fostered between me and my parents and brother, has been replaced by a closeness and communication that's stronger than it was even before she entered our lives. We've all learned to be more direct about our concerns, more willing to ask difficult questions when something seems wrong. My brother David, in particular, has become one of my closest confidants and advisors. "I always knew something was off about Melissa," he told me recently. "But I didn't know how to talk to you about it without seeming jealous or competitive. Next time someone in the family seems to be isolating themselves or changing dramatically, I'm going to speak up regardless of how awkward it might be." The jewelry that started this whole revelation, the pieces I originally bought for Sarah and that Melissa tried to make me return under false pretenses, has taken on symbolic meaning for both of us. Sarah wears the diamond necklace to important business meetings and social events, not as a display of wealth, but as a reminder that authentic love creates beauty rather than destroying it. "When I see this necklace," she explained to me, "I think about how lucky we are that you recognized the truth before it was too late. How lucky we are that you chose to fight for what was real rather than accepting what was convenient." The criminal organization that Melissa and Hayes were part of has been completely dismantled, with arrests in 6 states and forfeiture of millions of dollars in assets. But more importantly, their victims are rebuilding their lives with the dignity and resources that were stolen from them. 2 of the families whose businesses were fraudulently acquired have been able to buy back their companies. The others have started new ventures with the compensation they received from asset forfeiture. I've stayed in touch with several of these families, and we've formed an informal network of mutual support and information sharing. If anyone recognizes signs of the kind of manipulation we all experienced, we alert each other and coordinate response strategies. It's a way of ensuring that what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else, a commitment to protecting the community that protected us. Looking ahead to our wedding next month, to the children Sarah and I want to raise together, to the business legacy we want to build and preserve, I feel grateful for the hardest lesson of my life. That the greatest gift isn't getting what you want, but learning who you really are when everything else is stripped away. The man I was before Melissa's manipulation was naive and trusting, but also authentic and principled. The man I became under her influence was suspicious and isolated, but also weak and easily controlled. The man I am now combines the best of both: trusting but not naive, principled but not rigid, confident but not arrogant. I chose truth over comfort, dignity over convenience, and love over manipulation. And in doing so, I found my way back to myself. As I prepare for the morning meeting with our architects about the new sustainable construction techniques Morrison Construction is pioneering, I realize that this is what redemption looks like. Not a dramatic reversal of fortune, but a quiet rebuilding of character, relationships, and purpose. The rest of my life will be spent proving that the man I've become deserves the trust and love that the man I was temporarily lost. And when Sarah emerges from the bathroom, already dressed for her own morning meetings at Chen Electronics, smiling at me with the warmth and confidence that I almost threw away, I know that some mistakes are worth making if they teach you to value what you almost lost. "Ready for another day of changing the world?" she asks, and I realize that's exactly what we're doing. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through the daily choice to live with integrity, to treat people with respect, and to build something lasting rather than just profitable. Always, I tell her, and I mean it completely. The man who died in that car crash 3.5 years ago was broken by betrayal and manipulation. The man who was reborn in his office chair that morning was stronger, wiser, and determined to protect everything worth protecting. But the man who will walk down the aisle next month, who will pledge his life to the woman who always saw the best in him, is something else entirely. He's free from the need to be perfect, free from the fear of being deceived, free from the obligation to save everyone else at the expense of his own soul, free to love completely, to trust carefully, and to build a life worth living with someone who shares his values and his vision for the future. That's what justice really means, not just punishment for wrongdoing, but the restoration of what was lost, the protection of what matters most, and the promise that tomorrow can be better than yesterday if we're brave enough to choose truth over lies, love over fear, and hope over despair. As we drive downtown together, Sarah's hand in mine, I think about the jewelry store where this all began, where Melissa tried to complete my humiliation by making me pretend to be someone else. I drove past it last week and noticed that they've installed a new security system, probably in response to the fraud cases that made headlines during the trial. But what struck me most was the window display. An engagement ring collection featuring pieces that celebrate authentic love stories, partnerships built on trust and mutual respect rather than financial convenience or social climbing. Progress in its own small way. The story of James Morrison, who was manipulated, betrayed, and broken, is over. The story of James Morrison, who learned, grew, and chose to rebuild himself and his relationships with integrity, is just beginning. And I can't wait to see what comes next.